Hi everyone, welcome back to Aspergers from the Inside. You're here with Paul. So today's question is, will I be able to drive? So driving is a really practical, useful skill in our society, but a surprising amount of autistic people do not drive for various reasons. So I'll go through some of the barriers that can potentially prevent someone from ever learning to drive or being able to drive. I'll share some of my experience. I do drive now, but before I learned, I was quite anxious for a lot of reasons. And finally, I'll share some disturbing trends that I've noticed in society today that make me wonder: will I be able to drive in the future? Right? It feels like things are getting worse, less autism friendly, and I actually worry. Even though I can drive now, I worry if I will be able to drive in the future. So I'll mention a couple of barriers here, and I'm sure there's absolutely no way I'll be able to cover them all. And if you are autistic and don't drive, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What are the barriers for you that prevent you from being able to drive or being able to learn to drive? So just quickly, a couple of things are coordination, right? Some of us have dyspraxia, which makes coordination a challenge. There's a lot of stress and responsibility involved in driving a car. If you make a mistake, you could seriously injure yourself or someone else or worse, right? So that's a lot of stress and responsibility that you have to sort of deal with, especially when you're learning and before you're confident, and coupled with potentially challenging, taking longer to learn and things like that. Attention is a big one for me. You need to be focused the whole time, and there are some things you need to pay attention to, and it's really important that you notice things on the road, and there are some things you have to block out of your attention. And if they take your attention away from the road or away from other cars, especially in traffic, that can be additionally stressful, additionally difficult, especially if attention regulation is a challenge. So they're just a couple of things that could potentially get in the way. I'm sure there's a lot more. And again, I'd love to hear from you in the comments what your barriers are. But for me, before I learned to drive, I was really, really scared of driving. I thought that I would never be able to drive. I just thought was completely, I would never be able to learn, and I just have to deal with it. And the reason for that was because I used to play computer games, and I used to be horrifically bad at those racing games. I would spin out at every corner, or I would come last, or I was so bad at those games that I assumed that driving a real car would be just as difficult for me, and I would never learn how to do it. Fortunately, there's a big difference between those racing games and driving a real car, and the kind of feedback of my body and what I can see and how fast I feel the car is going and things like that made it actually possible to drive. And I'm actually a really good driver. I'm quite coordinated. I picked it up fairly quickly. I drove for 12 months. I got up 120 hours before I got my license, which was, I think it's mandatory nowadays, but it was only recommended back when I got my license. I got my license on my 18th birthday. I was really keen to do it. I really appreciate driving. I remember I took a couple of professional lessons, just a handful, just before I took my driving test. And I remember my instructor saying, "Wow, you're really comfortable and confident here. It feels like you've been driving for years." And that didn't make sense to me. I'm like, I have been driving for a year. No wonder I'm so confident. I'm like, yes, but it feels like you've been driving for 10 years. And I guess that's a bit of, it shows the kind of binary nature of, you can either do it or you can't do it. I know that's the case for me with my skills. If I can do something, then I've probably practiced it so much that it looks like it comes naturally, even though it actually does not come naturally. It came through practice. So nowadays, I'm really confident driving. Everything's great. But I am becoming increasingly concerned at distractions about advertising that seem to becoming that are legal and seem to be getting worse and worse. I'm talking about billboards, I'm talking about flashing lights and screens. When I was learning to drive, sure, there were big billboards, but they were static. They didn't move, they didn't talk at you. These days, it's cheaper to make a billboard that is actually a big screen, and it keeps changing and it keeps moving, and that is extremely distracting for me. Fortunately, at the moment, there's not too many of them at the moment, but there's one on the freeway near where I live, and I go under the tunnel, and I literally have to like consciously block out the top half of my vision for that 20 seconds as I drive past that. Now, that is not good. That is not safe for concentration to have to be, like, it takes up so much of my concentration that if anything else happened in that time, that would not be safe at all. I live in Melbourne, and Melbourne Airport, the last time I went there, I noticed they have two huge, I'm talking like IMAX style movie screen billboards with moving pictures on them that you see on the side, sort of on the front side as you drive in. That's not okay. I'm trying to drive. I don't want to watch TV. Yes, I know that if you have an ad that moves at me, I'm more likely to look at it. Yes, I'm sure that works from a marketing perspective, but I don't really understand how that can be legal and safe when you're supposed to be driving, not watching a TV screen on the side of the road. My final example, and fortunately I've only ever seen this once, so I really hope this doesn't happen. But there was a taxi, and it had a thing on the roof of the taxi, and on the side of it, instead of just having a name or a brand or something, it actually had a screen with a moving image on it, on a car on the road. Imagine if every car or every taxi or every commercial vehicle had a TV screen on it, and I'm supposed to be driving and ignoring all of these TV screens. That would be, I seriously worry if one day I'm not going to be able to drive because of that attention issue. I know this happens a lot in other situations, in shopping centers, for example. You can't look in any direction without seeing a moving screen. Even just filling up, at the petrol station, I can't I can't fill the car with petrol without having a TV screen talking to me and moving in front of me. It's really hard to avoid. I'm surprised it's legal. I'm ranting a little bit at the moment because I'm quite upset and worried about it. So I hope that common sense will prevail, and at the very least, in the form of driving, it will become a safety concern for enough people that it will be legislated that kind of stuff becomes illegal. I'm sure you wanted to hear about that. You probably wanted to hear about driving, not my rants about screens and my own personal sensory and attention issues. But I might leave it there. Driving is a big challenge for a lot of us. And if you have your own story for driving, please leave it in the comments and share with us all. And I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you again next week. Okay, bye.